Is the Airbnb rental market crashing? Certain sites are reporting a 40% decline in Airbnb rental revenues across the board, and they're referring to this as an Airbnb crash. So what's going on? Are Airbnb revenues falling off a cliff, or is the Airbnb crash greatly exaggerated? We're going to dig into the data and find out what's actually going on and find out what it means for the Airbnb and short-term rental market here in Denver after this glorious 9-second intro. Roll it. Okay, as always, my name is Sam Newman. I'm a local Denver real estate professional. It is my aim to be your realtor of choice for anything you need, but especially when it comes to short-term rentals. I've helped a number of people buy short-term rental properties or rental properties in general, and I would love to help you too. That is assuming the rental market isn't crashing and there's no money to be made anymore, which if you look at some of the headlines, that is what they would like you to believe. So let's take a look. Let's see what people are saying, and then let's see what the data actually support. And at the very end of this, I'm going to give you kind of my number one bonus tip for investing in Airbnbs in our area, in the greater Denver area. So stick around for that if you're interested. Okay, so here's the deal. There have been a lot of articles written about this in the last month or so, and it all really stems from one exchange on Twitter, and we're going to take a look into that. So we have Newsweek here, which is an article talking about it, and they go into the background of Airbnb and is there a crash, but really they're just going to focus on a few different tweets. So first of all, in the first paragraph, they're talking about the assertion that there's an Airbnb revenue crash, just crash in terms of the amount of money that Airbnb owners, Airbnb hosts are bringing in on a monthly basis. And not only that, they're saying that number is crashing, but they're saying this could also trigger a housing market crash in the greater housing market crash on par with the 2008 subprime crisis. Okay, quite the assertion, wouldn't you say? So they go into the tweets. Here's the main tweet, and then here's the reply tweet. And we're going to talk about both those, but let's just go check them out. Native in their native area, their native land, Twitter. So it all started with this guy, Nick Gurley, who's the CEO of Reventure Consulting. Don't know what that is, but he's the #1 real estate channel on YouTube. So he says 4 million monthly views. And who am I to shake a stick at that? Good job, Nick Gurley. I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll just call him Nick. So basically, he started off this firestorm. A lot's been written about this, but he says the Airbnb collapse is real. And he's saying revenues are down nearly 50% in cities like Phoenix and Austin. And then he says, watch out for a wave of forced selling from Airbnb owners later this year, where essentially they can't make money anymore. They have this investment property, revenues dropping so much, they're all going to have to sell. Here's the graphic he points to. So this is all this data this is the top 15 cities that have fallen according to their data in terms of Airbnb revenue. The source is alltherooms.com. All the Rooms is a short-term rental and rental market in general data site that helps people who theoretically are investors in rental properties parse out their data and get their numbers straight. There's a lot of sites that do this. There's one big one, and that's not All the Rooms, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway, let's look at the graphic first. So he points out Phoenix, Arizona, and Austin, Texas, two big cities in the top three that are down 47% and 46%. You'll also notice here number 9, Denver, Colorado, they say is down nearly 39% in terms of revenue. So the metric here is RevPal, and that means revenue per available listing. Sometimes you see it RevPAR, revenue per available room. Anyway, it's the same thing. It's basically how much the available listings on Airbnb bring in per month. For Denver, they're saying it was 3,300, almost 3,400 in May 2022. And in May 2023, it was down to 2,000. Huge drop. So that's the assertion, and that's where his data comes from. One website, which is a data website, so it's not a bad assertion to bring up. But then there was the response from this guy, Jamie Lane. Jamie Lane is the chief economist with AirDNA. If you've even looked into Airbnb investing before, you probably have heard of AirDNA. It is what I'm talking about. It's the #1 data and tracking website for short-term rentals, bar none. Not throwing shade at anybody here. We need more than one game in town, but for what it's worth, everybody I know that dabbles at least in short-term rental investing, uses AirDNA. Everybody. I don't know anybody who uses All the Rooms. That doesn't mean the data is not good. Just food for thought. So Jamie comes and fires back, and he says, let's get some facts straight. There is not a collapse in RevPal, revenue per available listing. Is it down in 2023? Yes. Is it down 40%? No. So he pulls the numbers from AirDNA, and they are different in one key way, which we'll talk about. But first, let's look at the numbers, which is right here in the tweet. He says the average market listed is seeing RevPal a decrease decrease of 3.6%, not 40%. So still down, but not down nearly as much. It's a pretty gentle fall over time. And when you consider that between May of 2022 and May of 2023, home prices, at least in the Denver metro, are down anywhere from 6 to 8%. That's actually better than that. And if we expand the graphic here and take a look at Denver specifically, you will see, based on the AirDNA data over on the right, and sorry, it's very small here, but you'll see from May 2022 to May 2023, it was actually up 0.4%. So not only not down that much, but not down at all here in Denver. So what's going on here? You basically have two different stories. I say the data say this, and I say they don't say that. They say something completely different. Well, it's hard to know exactly because we don't have access to all their back end, and even if we did, I'm not looking through all that. But if we go back to the Newsweek article here, there's a lot of information in here and a lot of fluff and a lot of people saying things. But scrolling down to the bottom, I found one very interesting paragraph. So what Jamie Lane of AirDNA says is all the rooms data only includes Airbnb listings. However, AirDNA covers properties listed on Airbnb and or VRBO. This is huge. And we deduplicate those listings, which are on both sites, to give the true size of the industry. So I don't know what the breakdown is as far as available properties on Airbnb versus VRBO, but there are a significant number of properties on both. I am an Airbnb or VRBO traveler. I've booked on both. The term Airbnb is often used ubiquitously to talk about short-term rentals. It's like Kleenex being used to talk about facial tissues when Kleenex is really just a brand. Airbnb is really just one website that lists short-term rentals. They kind of invented it, so fair play to them. That's why it gets used so much. But VRBO, very, very big website as well. And so if all the rooms data is only using one of those websites, you could see how it might be skewed, and you understand how the data is way, way different. That last part's interesting too, because there are a lot of properties that are listed on both sites, right? You want to capture as many people as possible, so it's listed on both websites. What they do is they deduplicate, so they go in and say, oh, this property is listed on both. We're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to get an accurate picture of how often it's actually being booked. Because if you just looked at one of the websites, you could say, oh, this property is only being booked 30% of the time. Yeah, that's because it's being booked 60% of the time on the other one. It does seem like AirDNA's data is better. That could go in line with the reason that they are the gold standard for this short-term rental data, at least right now. I can't say for sure that Nick isn't right about some of this, but I think it's fair to say there's not a crash or a collapse in the Airbnb market nationally or certainly locally, especially considering, based on the one data set, we're actually up a little bit since last year. And I think it's even fairer to say that this is not going to cause a widespread housing market collapse, which people have been predicting since 2020, and the market has only gone up. One thing to note about the Denver market specifically, and why I think it's actually a stronger market than many metro areas, and why we're probably seeing our numbers tick up a little bit or stay flat at the very worst, when a lot of them actually are dropping a little bit. And that's just because of how restrictive the laws are in Denver. We have a primary residence rule in Denver and the majority of the surrounding suburbs. This is a huge, huge deal. If you've watched any of my videos on Airbnb before, you know that means that by law, to get licensed in the city of Denver and in a lot of these other areas to rent your home, whatever home it is you own, as an Airbnb, it has to be your primary residence. You cannot just go buy a home and list it on Airbnb 100% of the time. There are certain areas in the Denver metro and beyond that do not have a primary residence law. Those are few and far between, and these are the areas I'm generally helping people navigate when they want to get a short-term rental investment property. But the point is, so many of these areas, including Denver, have this primary residence rule, meaning that dramatically limits the number of Airbnb listings there can be, right? You can't just go buy one, you can't go buy up a whole neighborhood. It's got to be your primary residence. Supply is much more limited. Supply, obviously, economically is half the equation. So even as short-term rentals get less in vogue, even as people get tired of the fees, even as people just aren't traveling and staying in places the way they were during COVID, and all of these things I do believe are true, all these things I do believe are changing a little bit. The Denver market is still so restrictive that those people who do have an Airbnb property or a VRBO are working in a tight supply environment, and thus the demand is going to them. If you're able to get in, if you're able to navigate the laws, it is a good place to be in because a lot of people aren't. I do think things are changing. I'm getting tired of the fees personally. When I travel, I'm getting tired of a $350 cleaning fee, especially when they make me strip the beds and do the dishes or whatever else. I'm getting tired of thinking I'm booking a certain rate, and then I get hit with all the fees and realizing it's a lot more than I expected, and then not even booking it. Things are changing. I think the shine is wearing off a little bit, as happens with any new technology, which Airbnb still is. But it also has changed the game in a lot of ways and is a completely new way to travel that that, in my opinion, is always going to be valuable for certain situations. And here in the Denver metro, I wouldn't worry if you own an Airbnb. And by the way, you're probably not worried because you're probably doing just fine as revenues are slightly up over last year. For what it's worth, this checks out anecdotally with what I've seen. The people that I have helped purchase short-term rental properties and just other people I know who have short-term rentals are not reporting any sort of downturn at all in their revenue. A lot of people are killing it, especially the ones that do it right. And there's a whole lot that goes into that, and that's a completely different video. But the point is, if this is something you're interested in, this is still a good opportunity as long as you target the right areas. Two ways to do it. Number one is abide by the primary residence rule. Use your primary residence and have a different place to be, whatever that is, when you're renting it out. And number two, buying in one of these areas that does not have the primary residence rule. There still are restrictions, but there are a number of places, not as many as aren't, but there are still a number of places you can buy that don't yet have a primary residence rule. Westminster's been threatening it for years, haven't put it in yet. Northglenn, Centennial, and my favorite, Jefferson County. When I say my favorite, it's actually not my favorite anymore. We're going to get to my favorite in just a second, my new favorite. But Jeffco is great because people get the Colorado experience. Typically, it's much more in the foothills, and it has to be just on 1 acre. That's the big restriction. Licensing is tough, but I digress. Jefferson County has been great. Their restrictions are tightening up. So my new favorite, and this is my little bonus tip if you're looking to buy an Airbnb, Park County. Jefferson County's much more loose neighbor. Now, Park County's big, and it goes actually way into the mountains. So if you're trying to buy a property in or around the Denver metro, not all of Park County is going to appeal to you. But the areas closer to town, let's say within an hour drive of Denver, like Bailey, are actually a great opportunity right now for a few reasons. Number one, it's the Colorado life. It is the mountain vibe, totally. So you capture people who are coming in from out of town and want to have a Colorado vacation. And you're also capturing people like me who live in town and maybe just want to get out of the city for a weekend. Number two, the rules. The rules are just so much more relaxed in Park County. It's kind of the Wild West still. Just the way they do things, I don't know. They have like Southern accents out there for some reason. It is the Wild West in a way, and there is still a licensing requirement, but the licensing requirement is much less stringent than most or all other places I've seen in the area, including Jefferson County. So if you want to go Airbnb shopping, check out Bailey, check out other areas of Park County. And call me, because I do this all the time. Would love to help. Otherwise, hope this was helpful. See ya.